hurricane plan always was, we're going to send the family out before this could even get out of hand. So my family evacuated days ahead because we do have a special needs child. We know that our setup is not going to go well if people are left at home. And so I think that that's the most important thing when you're looking at your hurricane preparedness plan. Look at what your family needs. And if you are going to be somebody that voluntarily evacuates, do it before you're even getting to the point where people have to mandatorily evacuate.
Hurricane Ian decimated much of coastal Southwest Florida almost a year ago, and efforts to rebuild are still in motion. Many local businesses are still struggling to reopen even a year later. Marketing manager for the Beachside Hospitality Group, Julia Casino, joins me now. Julia, you spoke with us right after Hurricane Ian hit last year. I remember a number of your employees at one of the restaurants that was completely destroyed had lost everything. What progress has been made in the months, almost a year since?
Well, immediately following the aftermath of Ian, we posted a GoFundMe for our staff. We were also able to receive almost $50,000 in donations from guests and visitors and just family and friends that saw. We had 73 employees that have lost their jobs. They've lost their homes. We also received an outpouring of support from donations from local businesses, whether it be clothes, toys for children. We ended up filling a 28-foot box truck up twice to deliver goods to those employees. Since that time, it's been difficult to navigate because the building itself was completely demolished. And because of that, we are now considered a new build on Fort Myers Beach. And with that comes some new uncertainties that we were not prepared for. Parking is a big one of those. And so we're currently still in the works with the city to try and get a variance so we don't have to provide parking. Our restaurant thrived without parking spaces before. And so that's really been the biggest hurdle for us to get back to being on Fort Myers Beach.
Yeah, can you tell us more about that? Because I know you made changes across the whole restaurant group in how you respond to during and after events like Ian, but also there was new mandates from some of the cities and from the state. How is that hindering your plans to get some of these this restaurant back open?
Well, in regards to Fort Myers Beach, the new location, because it's a new build now, it is going to have parking. That is the new city ordinance. That's the county ordinance. And unfortunately, that is something that we've had to navigate. In regards to hurricane preparedness, you know, we live in Florida. And so everyone kind of prepares for this, but there's really only so much that you can do to prepare for a storm this devastating. We have always had a really great hurricane preparedness plan. And with that comes closing all of our restaurants down across the state with at least 24 hours prior to those first fronts making landfall. And that allows our employees to get their own homes ready for a storm, because while we care about our business, we care about our employees too. We want to make sure that their homes are safe. And that allows us to assess what we plan on seeing with those locations and the storms. We will cover windows with plywood. We will sandbag anything that is outside, whether it be a picnic table, tables, chairs, umbrellas, anything that can move will be moved inside. And in regards to Ian, we're really proud of our team and the work that they put into leading up to the storm. They certainly did the best they could, but you know, when that water rises 5, 6, 7 feet, there's really only so much preparedness that you can have.
Yeah, that was a storm of a historic nature, and we certainly hope that you can get the restaurant back open as soon as possible, get everybody back to work, and we wish you the absolute best moving through the rest of this hurricane season. Julia Casino, marketing manager with the Beachside Hospitality Group, thanks for talking with us here on Fox Weather.
Thanks for having me, Ian.
Let's move to Southern California now. Cathedral City is still digging out of the mud and the debris caused by Hillary earlier this week. Major flooding triggered mudslides that washed out roads and left cars stranded. A front-end loader had to rescue nearly 50 people trapped in the mud. Fox Weather's Max Gordon is in Cathedral City. Max, some of these scenes that we saw out of desert areas in California were just unbelievable. What's making this recovery so difficult?
Yeah, well, I mean, just the sheer amount of mud. You can see a lot of this mud right behind me, and these piles of dirt are currently being placed right there as front-end loaders. The ones that were rescuing people just a few days ago are now being used to try and dig out. Now, a lot of homes have been damaged here in Cathedral City, about $69 million worth of damage here in Riverside County. Businesses also feeling the brunt of Hillary. A lot of these businesses filled with about 4 feet of mud. I talked to one business owner about why his future feels so uncertain right now.
I don't want to think emotionally. First couple of nights, I woke up in the middle of the night thinking it just might be a nightmare or something. But then I realized, okay, no, this has happened. Just got to move forward, take one step, one scoop of dirt away. Just little by little, we have small mini goals for every day. We're trying to see if we can achieve the goals or make whatever we can make sense of it, basically.
Now over in Palm Springs, a few miles away, Indian Canyon Drive, one of the main...
Ray Magliozzi here. When you need parts, eBay Motors ensures a guaranteed fit. Hey, Dave.
Yep. Wait,
How are those new wipers?
they're small.
Just go to eBay Motors, where the check means a guaranteed fit. Let's ride.
The desert for any period of time knows that it only takes a trickle of rain to close Indian Canyon.
Now, it's still unclear when these bridges will be able to be built. It's also still unclear how long it's going to take for this community here, Cathedral City, to clean up. But as you can see, the front-end loaders continue to work. The mud continues to pile up. It's going to likely be a long time coming. Ian?
Max, those scenes are just wild. You consider that this tropical moisture came down in a matter of hours, and the cleanup is expected to take months. Max Gordon, thank you. That's going to do it for this hour of Fox Weather Now. Don't forget, you can download the Fox Weather app to stay up to date with the latest forecast. That'll be especially important this weekend into next week as we track a lot of activity in the tropics. We'll get you updated on Invest 93L, eventually headed for the Gulf, when Fox Weather comes right back.
Right now on Fox Weather Live, Florida keeping close watch on a tropical disturbance slowly moving towards the Gulf of Mexico. Its path unclear, but now is the time to make a plan if you live right along the Gulf Coast.
Absolutely. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, and we'll be tracking this storm system every step of the way just to keep you safe.
Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Friday.
Yeah.
I'm Marissa Torres.
And I'm Bob Van Dillen. Good to see you Friday evening. All right, good stuff.
Right. It's been a long week. It's been a very long week.
It has been. We had a tropical storm out in California, if you remember, was this week. That was Monday.
That was this week, yep.
That's been a long one.
Yep. So we'll talk about Hillary from Sunday into Harold on Tuesday, and then eventually we have to go ahead and talk about Franklin. In the meantime, we do want to talk about this disturbance and really how it could become our next named storm in the Atlantic.
Which would be the Idalia, is that right?
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and take it right over to Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Brian Norcross. Brian with the latest. And I think the thing to remember with this is while we need to prepare, I mean, we're still talking about something that really hasn't developed, that is still a few days out from even impacting anybody.
Yeah, we're talking about next week. Here it's only Friday, and a lot's going to happen over the weekend in terms of our understanding of the system, because we can see right now that it is indeed developing. Look down here in the Caribbean, and what we see is this cluster of thunderstorms is really getting stronger and more intense. The center of circulation is somewhere right in here, and when we see thunderstorms developing near the center, that's an indication that the system has the opportunity to further develop, and we do think that's going to happen, and the upper level wind pattern is becoming more conducive here. I'll show you what's been going on here. Look at this swirl out here that's moving into Mexico. Well, this is actually in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and this is what acted as a scoop to pull the disturbance, which is now called Invest 93L, out of the Pacific Ocean, across Central America, into the Caribbean. But this is moving out of the picture now. So what's happening is a more conducive environment is moving over top of the system. Here we can see it on the water vapor. Here you see the scoop out here moving away. Or look, you can see the kind of scooping winds coming in from the south here. But look what's happening over top of the disturbance here. First of all, you see all this moisture, all the kind of blue, greens, and purples. That's moisture in the atmosphere. But look at the way the winds are turning. Notice they're turning this way over top of the disturbance. So when the winds aloft are turning in a clockwise direction, that's a sign that the environment over the disturbance is becoming more conducive for development, and that's what we expect to happen. This is the thing making kind of a hostile environment, but it's moving out of the picture. So now more conducive conditions are moving in. So we expect this thing to kind of develop, but it's all around all this land here. So it's going to be involved with Yucatan, maybe Cuba, depending on exactly what happens with it. National Hurricane Center says it's going to move to the north, but what's going to happen is it's going to move to the north very slowly through the weekend and stay in this area somewhere. So when we get to Monday morning and into Tuesday, it's still going to be down here in the southern Gulf. I think the 80% chance is whether it's going to be a tropical depression. I think the odds strongly favor it being a tropical depression down here, at least a tropical depression in the southern Gulf, especially with the development we've seen and that upper level high pressure system over top of it. All these conducive factors make us think it will be there. Then the question is, what's going to happen as it moves to the north? I know this looks like a cone. It's not technically a cone, but as you'll see, this is the direction the storm is going, because what we're waiting for is another scoop to come along here and move it to the north. And we have high confidence that's going to happen. How it and the storm are going to interact, that's the open question. So here is the thinking where we are right now, and the dark greens are the moisture developing around it, all these signs of a system that will develop. Watch as we go through the next few days, through the weekend. It drifts over a little bit because it doesn't have any steering. It's kind of stuck under that high pressure system right now, which allows it to develop, if it weren't interacting with land, But how much does it interact and how much can it develop? That's an open question. But the odds, based on what we know of all the computer forecasts, indicate it probably will be at least a depression when it's here in the southern Gulf. Could even be a tropical storm. But now that's Tuesday morning, so we're talking about 4 days from now, or 3.5 days from now. Now watch as we go forward in time, and this is the European model that puts it on the coast Wednesday morning. I didn't change this to a tropical storm because could it be a hurricane? Yes, it could, but here, something if we look at this closely, we can see. Remember what I said, the darker green is the more intense moisture? Notice that's all out in front. What that's an indication of is that scoop is pushing it and kind of tilting the system and stretching it out. Well, when that happens, it can't get too terribly strong. It can intensify, but it can't get too terribly strong. So if the scoop and the system interact in that way, that will be a dampening factor on how strong the scoop is just going to nudge it and actually be a little farther off and allow it to intensify some. That's an open question. We'll hopefully get better answers on that over the weekend. But also, I don't want you to look at that L there and say, oh, it's going north of Tampa. No, imagine it could be here, it could be here. So just think of a wide swath as all possibilities at this point. And also, remember, anything that goes in north of Tampa is pushing water in toward Tampa Bay. So we'll just keep that in mind. Just, again, this is something that we need to watch as we go through the weekend. Then it speeds off and it gets involved with a cold front, and it could be heavy rain and windy conditions along the Carolina coast. We'll keep an eye on that next week. So what can we expect here on the west coast of Florida? Well, let's say gusty winds, periods of heavy rain, and some storm surge. The question is, what's the level of those impacts? How gusty are the winds? How heavy is the rain? How concentrated is the rain? And what kind of storm surge do we get? You know, do we get 1 to 2 feet, or do we get 3 to 4 feet? Both of those are open questions now because that Gulf Coast very, very susceptible to that, and we'll hopefully answer this better as we go through the weekend. What's going on with this thing then? What's steering it? Well, this jet stream up here is not affecting it now, and that's why it doesn't have much steering going on. This is the Tuesday position, but then as we get through Tuesday into Wednesday, the jet stream dips down and kind of grabs it and takes it north and then shoots it on off, and it'll go on off the East Coast with that. So it's that scoop that we're waiting on to take it north, and exactly how the scoop and the storm interact. That is a fine question to ask with no fine answer right now. Bob and Marissa?
Yeah, that was my question to you is, given the fact that we've got real warm sea surface temperatures, I mean, it's had all summer to boil up, right? We're in the end of August, those temperatures in the upper 80s. Do you think that trough coming down is going to put a lid on the idea of maybe rapid intensification at this point, or is it just too early to tell?
Well, it's too early to tell, but there's a good chance that that's true, Bob. That there are such a thing when you have this dip in the jet stream or a trough. We have this thing called good trough, bad trough. From the storm standpoint, a good trough, in other words, one that makes it get stronger, can actually help it get stronger if the trough is just off to the west. So it's pulling air out of the top of the system, but it's not shredding it. A bad trough is when it's right over top of the system and it stretches the moisture out. So the European model shows that stretching motion, but there are forecasts that show less of it. So, but about rapid intensification, yes, we cross our fingers that it would tend to disincline that to happen.
Hope it's a race, and hope it runs right into that bad trough is what I'm hoping.
Yeah, exactly, right? And we just watched Harold in the Gulf, too, so never going to underestimate anything, especially coming out of the Gulf waters. Fox Weather Hurricane Specialist Brian Norcross, thank you for that breakdown.
Always love hearing that. All right, let's turn to Franklin now. And look at this video from the hurricane hunters flying through the storm last night. Amazing. Look at the lightning popping up right there. I've always wanted to do that. Get on one of those hurricane hunters. I've not yet been able to do it, but man, that looks so fun to me. The storm is not expected to hit the U.S. mainland, but we will see rip currents begin to form probably on Monday or Tuesday of next week, starting around the Outer Banks and then stretching up the eastern seaboard, hopefully gone by Labor Day weekend. So that's what we're looking at there. As for the latest, we've got the 5 o'clock advisory numbers right here. Still 50-mile-per-hour winds. And if you look at that, it's not a very healthy-looking storm system, which is good. And when I say that, I mean most of the thunderstorm action is on that east side because you have a nice westerly wind blowing it across that way. When you have that kind of a disturbance, then have a chance to really consolidate and turn into a big storm itself. So that's the way it looks right here. And it is actually drifting to the east-southeast. Not even moving to the north right now, but that's probably going to change as we get into the weekend. You can see the way it looks. Here's where it goes. Tropical storm force winds mostly on the east side. You can see all the yellow shaded area right there. And again, it extends out over 100 miles out to the east. Here's the track. And again, it looks like it's going to get picked up, move up to the north. And then ultimately with that trough of low pressure that's actually going to affect the one down by the Gulf, if it forms, is also going to help steer out old Franklin right here as it moves on in. Hopefully it splits the uprights between Bermuda and Cape Hatteras and doesn't affect anybody. Should not make direct landfall. But what we are going to see as that trough pushes through will be mostly large waves. And you can see all the hurricane models taking away from the East Coast. That's good news. When you see all the cluster, everything on the east side, not even one near the U.S. mainland, that's good stuff. But Bermuda still has to watch it, especially Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. As for the rip current threat, we've got it right now, but that's because of a cold front that's moved through and you get the winds offshore. What we're expecting is the heavy wave action to get there by Tuesday into Wednesday, Monday night around the Outer Banks, and it's stretching all the way up the eastern seaboard through the end of the week. And again, it's a super full moon on Wednesday. So we've got the king tides. It's going to make the waves even bigger. Yeah. Beach erosion a problem. It's also a blue moon on that day.
So it's magical, yet can also be a problem if you live right near the coast.
It could be problematic.
It could be problematic. All right, be safe, especially if you're heading out to the beaches, guys. One final hurrah before summer, I guess, unofficially ends. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video. This is out of Michigan, just from last night. Tornadoes tearing through portions of the Great Lakes region. 5 people were killed as a result of these storms. Hundreds of thousands were left without power. You could see the destruction that it did. And a lot of these storms, they came once the sun set. Once we got past about 9 o'clock, it was off to the races across lower Michigan. This is a look at really just what radar was doing over the past from last night into earlier this morning. And you can see that complex heading south. And it really did just light up across the southern part of Michigan once we got to about 10, 11 o'clock, midnight. The tornado reports, there were several, not just in Michigan, but also down and through Ohio, including in the Cleveland area. Very gusty winds. The concern with some of these winds could be 80, 85 miles per hour in any of those warnings. And you'll notice with the power outages, we still have several counties across Michigan without power. You're talking about 10, 25, maybe half of the county with customers still in the dark. So crews are working around the clock. You're still talking about just under 400,000 folks in Michigan, primarily in the lower part of the mitten there, that do not have power. Once we can get, that break and you get the gap in storms, it's easier to get out there and start to make some of those repairs. Now, I mentioned Cleveland also had some of those strong storms yet again, and you'll notice you also have about 140,000 customers without power in Ohio. Same reason, because of these storms moving through. A very active night, always tragic when we see it end with loss of life. A reminder that as we continue to navigate storms and through the summer season especially, make sure your alerts are turned on and you're very weather aware.
Yeah, that's a great point. And now what about tonight's threat? Well, we've got some storms that are bubbling up right now, but here is a live look at Springfield, Illinois, and it is hot, 96 degrees. Your dew point is 79. That makes it feel like 114. So these storms, you don't want them to be severe, but you certainly want them to drag that cooler air down to the surface as it taps into the mid-levels of the atmosphere. You want it to cool down. There's no way around that. Here's the way it looks with a radar picture. You can see the high pressure just centered right over Oklahoma and Texas. It's been the main driver of these ridge riders over the last really 2 months. So we got the showers of storms that are bubbling out here right now. Zero into the area, and you can see the slight chance. It's really a likely area. That's 2 out of 5 on the bad scale. That's a red region. That includes Springfield. You just saw it. I mean, you've got the energy out there with the heat and the humidity. But most of the storms right now are firing below the Ohio River. A couple of severe thunderstorm warnings. And these are because of the gusty winds. You're talking about 60-mile-per-hour gusts, possibly some small hail, too. Look at the lightning. You got that flashing out there also. They're also very heavy rainmakers, and they don't appear to be moving very quickly. So we are going to see the training event. I'm sure we're going to start seeing these flash flood warnings pop up again, especially if those storms don't move at all like they're moving slowly now. You can see the way it looks. We're looking until 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Hail less than 3/4 of an inch, but the wind speeds again 60 miles per hour. And it looks like these things are drifting down to the south and to the east. Let me take you through the next few hours. Watch the storms begin to bubble up. And there's one supercell that's around lower parts of Illinois, should ride into Indiana later on and possibly hopping into Kentucky. And you can see the way these storms will bubble up. And again, high pressure down to the south is allowing these things to ride to the east and ultimately down to the south. Or what about tomorrow? We're going to see that cold frontal boundary still in place. It's going to wash out just a bit. The energy won't be quite as strong, but still, there's a shot of some thunderstorm action. It looks like it's going to be in the low end, but you can't rule it out. Charlotte, Atlanta, all of Tennessee. Watch for this later this afternoon.
All right, and the heat is going to intensify for the south. Millions under heat alerts across several states. Some, they're just never really ending. Others, we're going to see a reemergence primarily into the southwest. We're back in some excessive heat warnings. But we're talking about Texas especially because we're looking at the worst drought since 2011. Houston, temperatures are sizzling yet again, just under 100 degrees. And that's not even factoring in the humidity. So let's go ahead and talk about the hottest day on record. That was yesterday. That was Thursday for Houston. We were talking about it last night here at Fox Weather. It ties the all-time hottest day for Houston. The other occurrences, it was back in 2011 and then also back in 2000 in September. Not all too often that you're getting up to 109 degrees. And again, that's the air temperature. That's not factoring in the humidity. The temperatures right now, Houston, not as bad as yesterday, so a little bit of relief, but I mean, it's still hot out there. Dallas at 107, OKC 102. Even as you stretch into New Orleans there, you're talking about temperatures well into the upper 90s. As you take a look at the heat index, again, it feels worse than the air temperature actually is because we have dew point temperatures that are still hanging out within the 70s, so very oppressive air. For tomorrow, we look ahead to your Saturday, the potential for some record heat, not just oppressive in places like Orlando down to San Antonio, forecasting 103 degrees there. Charleston, South Carolina, you could have record heat. For tomorrow, across the south, from Texas all the way into the southeast, we're talking about just very uncomfortable heat to have to deal with. Now, it is the weekend, so maybe you can get out to some of the beaches. We all know that the golf's not that refreshing, but if you can get out to the beaches, I think you'll maybe have a little bit of fun. Dew points are still quite high. I'm being optimistic.
Yes.
Being real optimistic. For tomorrow, again, just be careful with the heat index. If you are going to be out at the beach, make sure you have an umbrella and at least some shade to protect yourself.
That's a good point. There you go.
There you go.
All right, back to our top story, that disturbance tracking towards the Gulf of Mexico. The big question right now in everybody's mind, will it affect Florida? Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, and we'll have more on the tropics straight ahead.
Yay, Mickey Mouse!
So many emergency responders saying for people to stay inside.
A historic town is just wiped off the face of the earth.
What you're looking at is unbelievable. Take a look at just how deep the mud goes here.
Where the waves are breaking is where the beach would normally start.
Now we'll have to see what the aftermath really looks like.
We are all over this country covering all these weather events.
Hey, welcome back to Hurricane HQ. We are tracking Invest 93L and the potential trouble it could cause for Florida. You can see the way it looks right here. You got to get ready if you live anywhere, not just Florida, but even around the Mobile Bay into lower parts of Alabama. You're talking about Dothan, getting into Destin, Florida, too, and then southern parts of Georgia. You can see here in the map. That includes just south of Savannah into Valdosta, that area. So the I-75 corridor from Florida all the way through Georgia. Be prepared for at least some very heavy rain as everything is headed in that direction for next week.
I love this graphic. Ready, set, go. We're in the ready phase.
We are.
We're going to continue to tweak the forecast, and eventually we'll have some areas with set and go. Well, potentially. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're watching. Bryce Tyner is the lead meteorologist for the National Weather Service in the Florida Keys, joining us now to talk about this disturbance. But really, Bryce, we really have no storm that we're watching now. We will. Models are coming into agreement that there is something that will be impactful to Florida. What that is, how impactful that is, we still have to answer those two questions. But this really is an interesting area for this storm to develop, almost as if it was pretty much plucked out of the Pacific.
October, yeah.
Yeah, and for this time of year.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It certainly is different for this time of year, for this part of development. In August of 1881 was the last time we had a system develop in this particular region and then move towards the Florida Keys. With that being said, what is not necessarily different is this is a typical pattern that happens early and late in the season, where we get these systems that develop in the vicinity of the Yucatan Peninsula and then move northeastward. I will say that the one system in 1881 that did move through the Straits of Florida and did have more of a direct impact. We think, at least now with current forecasts, that this should have more of a peripheral impact on the Florida Keys.
Bryce, I was looking at the water temperatures. In July, they were sky high, and we were approaching the upper 90s at this point. What are the water temperatures outside by the Keys now? Have they come down at all?
Yep, temperatures have definitely come down, generally running in the mid to upper 80s at this point, which, you know, tropical systems, they really only need temperatures of about 80 degrees. So these systems can certainly still feed on these still relatively warm waters.
So then, you know, concern, and one of the things we were talking about, we saw Harold go through the Gulf. And it did intensify rather quickly. You know, luckily it was not anything very strong or concerning, and Texas was okay. Now we're watching Florida. Is there concern for rapid intensification given the very warm water, the battle of water and wind, what the air is doing aloft? Who wins out?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, and the difficult thing, as you mentioned earlier, is the system hasn't even formed a well-defined center at this point. So forecasting intensity is very difficult at this point. But yes, there's certainly a battle between the very warm waters in the Gulf and potential shear from the upper level trough in the western Gulf of Mexico. That will kind of have counter different influences on the actual strength of the system that will need to water. I will say the National Hurricane Center has gotten much better with rapid intensification over the past 5 to 10 years. And so I do encourage viewers to monitor the latest forecast of the National Hurricane Center for any potential rapid intensification.
Yeah, speaking of that, Bryce, I know the folks in the Keys, they've gone through a number of hurricanes, especially in the last couple of years. What threshold does it take with the winds to actually start shutting down the bridges, if this even came to that? I mean, I know it doesn't take much for you to be stuck where you are.
Yeah, certainly. You know, and the issue with the Keys, there is really only one way in and one way out, and it is something that we continually monitor. For this particular system, we do not expect to have impacts like that would necessarily disrupt, you know, transportation of the bridges.
Good.
But that will continue to be monitored.
Excellent.
And we'll continue to tweak the forecast, as I know you guys are going to be keeping a close eye on it as well. A lot will come to fruition as we navigate the next couple of days. Lead meteorologist at the National Weather Service in the Florida Keys, Bryce Tyner, thank you and good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Southern California is still digging out from the mud that Hillary left behind earlier this week. If you can believe that, that was Monday. It was this work week. Major flooding triggered mudslides that washed out roads and left cars stranded. Fox Weather's Max Gordon is in Cathedral City, where he spoke with residents and local officials about the community's recovery effort.
It's been several days since Tropical Storm Hilary hit this area, sending water and debris flowing into this Cathedral City neighborhood, and the cleanup is well underway. Tractors moving massive piles of dirt. The roads here are actually looking a lot better than they did even a few days ago, but as you can see around me, there is still a lot of work still left to be done. You can see debris, remnants of this disaster still left over, like this car sitting here on the side of the road, crushed by the power of the water and the mud. And you can see right here, you can see it goes up 4-5 feet, just massive amounts of mud flowing into this neighborhood. People here trying to clean up this mess. In all, Riverside County says there's been about $69 million worth of damage, with that damage estimate expected to go up. This has been an all-hands-on-deck type cleanup. Neighbors helping one another, people just trying to do whatever they can to repair their homes, dragging out damaged furniture, trying to clear out drywall before mold sets in. I talked to one neighbor here who talked about this effort and said he is just lucky to be alive.
I feel very sad, but I feel happy because we are alive. That's the most important. And I'm so happy because a lot of people from Cathedral City neighbor, they're so nice, came and helped for a couple days.
To the northwest in Palm Springs, a major artery, Indian Canyon Drive, is likely going to be closed for 2 months after floodwaters ripped apart the roadbed and covered it with 4 feet of mud. The road is a key connector to the area's main hospital, and the road's closure is forcing ambulances and others to take miles-long detours to get medical help. Local leaders say that climate trends point to more frequent extreme weather events like Tropical Storm Hilary, and they're pushing for funding so that bridges can be built to withstand. Cathedral City. It's unclear how long this cleanup effort is going to take, but what is clear is that it's going to take a while for folks here to get back on their feet. In Cathedral City, California, Max Gordon, Fox Weather.
All right, Max, so look at this, a live look at Chicago. If you remember on Wednesday night, they broke a record heat index at 118. Cold front's gone by. You had a record high temperature on the thermometer yesterday at 100. Well, it's going to feel a lot better than it has been for the last couple of days. Let me show you this. Chicago, yesterday, 100 degrees. That was on the thermometer. You had the humidity, and it felt much hotter than that for sure. Look at today, 81 degrees. The average high is 82, so you drop below average high temperatures for the first time in a long time, and I know it felt great, so good for you guys. Here's the way it looks. High temperature departures, and this is what it's going to be like tomorrow. Notice up there in northern parts of Wisconsin and the UP and Michigan, you're talking about 10 to 20 degrees below the average from where you should be. And this is just a far cry from where you were with all the heat just the other day. And you can see it's kind of average all the way around here with the frontal boundary draped across the region. But down south, again, I know you're sweltering, you're baking up one more time. Let me show you the way it looks. A taste of fall. Detroit, 74 degrees for tomorrow afternoon. Look at Chicago, only 73. And you're talking your average high is in the low 80s, right? 73 is going to feel great. Minneapolis, 73 degrees also. Rochester, 74. Look at that. It's gorgeous. And in New York, though, you still have 87 degrees. You're going to get the cooler taste come in, but not for a while. So here's the way it goes. We've got the area of low pressure sinking through, and then by early next week, the rest of the air begins to filter on down. So you've got temperatures around Sunday at 81 degrees in NYC. Upper 70s on Monday. Look at Syracuse, 75 back up to 79. But Detroit, you're going to stay below the average, 73 to 74 on Monday. Indy, mid to upper 70s over the next couple of days. And look at Boston. Here we go. 81 degrees on Saturday, 73, 70. Look at that, all the way down to 70 on Tuesday, back up to 75 on Friday. The average high is 79. And you can see the way it goes. Temperature outlook is that trough of low pressure right across the East Coast, which actually can help steer that disturbance out of the Gulf of Mexico and bend it eastward. So that's the reason why that is going to go in that direction. So let's just hope it doesn't have time to really bomb into something huge. Marissa.
All right, and still ahead this evening, the frenzy of tropical activity, it continues in the Atlantic. A new tropical storm could form as soon as this weekend, and Florida is on alert. The next name on the list is Idalia, and we are tracking it all right here on Fox Weather, your Hurricane HQ.
Right now on Fox Weather Live, Florida keeping a close eye on tropical disturbance right down to the south. It's slowly moving towards the Gulf of Mexico. Its path is totally unclear, but now it's time to make your plan if you live along the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, and we're going to be tracking this system every step of the way. Make sure you stay safe.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Bob Van Dillen.
And I'm Marissa Torres. We do appreciate you hanging out with us on this Friday. It's the end of the work week. It has been an incredibly long week, from the Pacific, out of California with Hillary, to Harold in the Gulf,
right,
to Franklin in the Atlantic,
the Dominican Republic, and to a brand new storm system we're watching. It's right around the Yucatan, and this one could be a problem for Florida as early as next week.
Yes.
Early next week.
Early next week.
Yeah.
And I think the thing to take away from this is that while nothing has really developed yet, when it does, things are going to start to move fast.
So and the models are diverging because there's no center of circulation yet,
Right.
but it could happen within the next few hours.
Exactly. It's hard to have a focus to really center.
To initialize where these models are going to go.
And so that's why we're here. We're breaking it down. We're explaining everything you need to know to make sure you're prepared. This is a look into Cancun, Mexico. Right over Mexico, we have some thunderstorms that are swirling around the Yucatan Peninsula. This is the area of disturbed weather that we're watching, and it is what is now Invest 93L. Now, getting that designation from the National Hurricane Center is important. It is going to allow them to run other models and get a little bit more concrete data that we can use to help better forecast this. But let's talk about where it is. There's Invest 93L, again, right over the Yucatan Peninsula. We'll talk about Franklin, not as concerned about remnants of Emily or Invest 92L, but we're watching them. And then we have that other potential disturbance. So it goes to show you it is August in the tropics, and you need to be very aware of what's brewing and what's happening. In terms of Invest 93L, it has a northwesterly movement, not moving all too fast. We're going to continue to see this, and it does look a little bit more organized, but we're going to continue to see it organize and continue to head off to the north over the next few days. There's not a whole lot of steering going on at this current moment, so over the next few days, while we may not be seeing much, it is going to have time to hang out over that colder water. Now, there are other factors that it's up against, including wind shear. However, it still has an 80% chance of development over the next 7 days from the National Hurricane Center, 40 of the next 2 days. So by the weekend, we could very likely be talking about a tropical depression, and in no time, a named storm. So here's a look at that storm chance of development. These are the previous model runs, but what you're seeing is that we are gaining certainty and really getting a better handle on what is likely going to be headed toward Florida. Now, we don't know exactly the full track, where it will go, where it will land, what the strength will be, what the impacts will be, but we know there will be some level of impacts, especially coming into the eastern side of the Gulf, which would then infect Florida. So increasing confidence of a tropical system that would form the Gulf of Mexico, heavy rain, possible flooding for Florida early next week. So we're looking at a window, I'd say by Monday, things are really starting to come in line, and then Tuesday, Wednesday especially could be when we feel the impacts. So watch right now as we play out the Fox model, and we're going through there Sunday into Monday, and as we head into Monday, Tuesday, you start to see what could very well be a depression at this time, lifting into the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico. And based on the steering mechanisms being taken off towards the east. Now, it could go anywhere within this. So I don't want you to hang on too closely to a location, but it's showing you that as we head into Tuesday, even before that, if you have outer rain bands and that sort of thing, you could start to feel the impacts, the deteriorating conditions, and something playing out into Tuesday, Wednesday. This is a look at just one model. This is the Euro, showing the potential for some very heavy rain across areas in Florida. This is a GFS, another model, but you'll notice it's setting up the rain a little bit further off to the west. Some areas really need it. So this could potentially be a beneficial rain situation, but either way, you need to be prepared for wind, for potential storm surge, for rain, everything.
Holy cow. You see Naples are 18 inches below average rainfall-wise this time of year.
Yeah, this whole stretch right there from Tampa down towards Naples.
Yeah, they need it.
They really need the rain.
They don't need it all at once in one day, but they definitely need it.
Yes.
All right, let me show you this. What about Tropical Storm Franklin? We've been watching this thing as it cruised over the Dominican Republic. That was just 2 days ago. Now it's moving up to the north and kind of meandering. Look at it drift right there. And on this satellite presentation, the last couple of hours, it does look like garbage, which is good news. You don't want to see this thing really intensify, tighten up. But a lot of thunderstorm action is still out there on the east side. And look at the purple developing right now on that northeastern quadrant. That's another big thunderstorm complex that develops. And that's typical of this time of year, this time of day, when the sun sets, gets cooler, allows those thunderstorms to build up a little bit better. And you see that on the bottom below me, that is the hurricane tracker last night flying through it. A lot of lightning with that guy. Unreal. So that's what we're looking at right now. 50-mile-per-hour sustained wind storm. It hasn't done any strengthening over the last 12 hours, and I don't think it will. But you can see the way it looks. We are watching all the tropical storm force winds on the east side, but it's not affecting any land. But where does it go from here? It's going to be interesting to see as this thing begins to move up to the northeast, ultimately the north, and then kind of bends around again. So we've got high pressure that builds in later on this work week, and we're talking about probably Friday night tonight into Saturday and Sunday. That high pressure is going to start to edge back over towards the East Coast. That's going to pin it in between a trough of low pressure, which will accelerate it and move it up to the north and to the east. So here are the steering level winds. That's a jet stream up to the north. It's going to edge in that direction. All the hurricane models take it away from the U.S. mainland. Newfoundland, you might have to watch out for this later on next week, probably Wednesday or Thursday. It could be a decaying storm system with a lot of wind and a lot of rain. But other than that, North America, not much of a chance. And I think Bermuda, you're going to miss it as well. What about the rip current threat? We had that going on tonight in the first part of tomorrow morning. So I know it's the weekend, Saturday. Water's warm out there at Jersey Shore, Delmarva Peninsula, Long Island. Got the winds onshore for the last couple of hours. So you get the rip currents are a possibility as that cold front settled down to the south. But the real big waves, they're going to start getting there on Monday for the Carolinas, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way up towards the Jersey Shore. Look at the wave forecast. Yellow shaded area right there, that's a good 6 to 9 foot breakers. They should stay offshore. However, you're going to see the big breakers move on in through the Outer Banks in North Carolina first. That'll be Monday, and then Tuesday and Wednesday, the whole thing slides up in a northerly direction. Now, generally, you're thinking, okay, we're going to see some beach erosion. It usually happens. The problem here is, though, we've got the king tides coming in. Those are the higher tides because of the full moon. Full moon this week. Next week is Wednesday for August. It's the second full moon of the month, so it's technically a blue moon. But it's also in perigee, which means the moon is closer to Earth, which means it's going to be a king tide. So when you have a supermoon like that, tides are even bigger during the high tides and the low tides. So if this thing comes in with a high tide, you're going to see a good chance of big breakers. Not only that, but some beach erosion. And yeah, the rip currents are going to be felt, especially Monday night, Tuesday, into Wednesday. Hopefully, sometime we're talking by Labor Day weekend, these waves should subside a little bit, but that's going to be the main threat for the U.S., and you can see how close it is to Bermuda. You guys aren't out of it yet. You're going to get big breakers. You probably get some wind out of this, a little bit of rain, but I don't think that's going to happen until probably later on, so that is some good news right there so far. All right, as we said, Franklin side effects could be felt along the East Coast this week, maybe next week in early. That's because the high tide is coming up there with the big currents. It has caused dozens of deaths this year so far, rip currents have. Fox Weather's Brandy Campbell has more from Miami Beach.
We're keeping an eye on beaches up and down the East Coast, including here on Miami Beach, as some locations have risks inside the surf zone, and that includes rip currents. And this is well ahead of any actual impacts from Franklin, which is well off into the Atlantic. Now here on Miami Beach behind me, you can see the flags just waving on that lifeguard stand, giving way to the wind, which also contributes to these risks. Now some of you may head to the beach this weekend or next week as we get close to Labor Day holiday. Depending on beach conditions and your proximity to a lifeguard, things can become dangerous or sometimes deadly because of the rip currents. We know that while Franklin could be passing hundreds of miles off the East Coast, it can exaggerate those conditions. Preliminary reports for this year show there have been 72 fatalities in the surf zone. 67 of those attributed to rip currents across the U.S. This information is as of last Monday, according to the National Weather Service. I spoke with Jason Casanova, the division chief for Miami Beach Ocean Rescue. He explained while they do have rip currents here, they haven't had any deaths this year attributed to them. However, along the 7.1 miles of beach here, they do have 38 lifeguard stands looking over millions of people that come here every year. Just last year, they rescued 900 people from the water, some caught in rip currents. He suggests, regardless of the beach, to always swim near a lifeguard.
What happens is people go out to the beach, they see the crashing waves, which is actually in the shallow water, and they see the calm, flat water, which is a deeper area where the rip current is. They go in that water, and they get pulled out from shore. But the most important thing is if you do get stuck in a rip current, don't panic, let it dissipate, and then swim parallel to shore. The worst thing to do is fight against the rip current because it's called the drowning machine. You exert all your energy to the point where you just stop and then you drown.
Take a look at this animation. It's exactly what Jason was talking about. You can see the swimmer being dragged out in what appears to be calm water in this gap of waves. They waited, and eventually they were able to swim behind the breaking waves, parallel to the shore, to escape it. So that's something good to keep in mind just whenever you head to the beach, but especially this weekend going into next week when we could feel those impacts on our beaches from Franklin. Reporting here on Miami Beach, I'm Brandy Campbell, Fox Weather.
And still ahead on Fox Weather Live, a deadly tornado outbreak in Michigan and Ohio. Hundreds of thousands of people are left without power, and we're getting an update on the aftermath. Plus, the Atlantic is getting busier as we approach the peak of hurricane season, which is September 10th. Fox Weather is your Hurricane HQ, and we'll have the latest straight ahead.
At Fox Weather, we've got you covered.
Through the best and worst weather.
Because there's nothing more important to us than keeping you safe.
We have a passion for weather and a passion for people. That's why we love what we do.
Fox Weather, weathering it together.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Fox Weather Live. The Atlantic, it is buzzing with activity as we are tracking 3 disturbances now. We've got a lot going on. We'll talk about what's happening over here with Invest 93 in a moment, but that's the most pressing one at the moment for the U.S. Because that's the one that could potentially bring impacts to Florida. But what we're also talking about is Franklin, that's going to bring us some rip current concerns as we head in through next week right along the eastern seaboard as it heads further north. Not as concerned about remnants of Emily. That's continued to kind of just meander out there, but it's expected to continue to head north. Not so conducive to anything really happening. We are going to watch that potential disturbance back to the, I guess that'd be east, but off the western coast of Africa there. And Invest 92L, that has a 50% chance of development, but is expected to continue to push off to the north-northwest. Invest 93L, 80% chance of development in the next 7 days. But remember, the next 7 days doesn't mean you won't feel impacts for 7 days. It's within 7 days that we're talking about the potential of some storm impacts to Florida. We'll continue to tweak that and keep you posted. I do just want to draw home the fact that it's